There was an investor who had 3 girlfriends, but he was unsure of which one to marry. So he decided to entrust each one of them with $5,000 to see how she would spend it. The first one goes out and gets a total makeover with the money. She gets new clothes, new hairdo, manicure, pedicure, the works, and tells the man, "I spent the money so I could look pretty for you because I love you so much." The second went out and bought a new set of golf clubs, a CD player, a big screen high-def television, and a stereo, and gives it to the man. She said, "I bought these gifts for you with the money because I love you so much." The third one takes the $5,000 and invests it in the stock market, doubles her investment, and then returns $5,000 to the man and reinvests the rest. She said, "I'm investing the rest of the money for our future because I love you so much." Which one of these 3 girls do you think he married? This morning's gospel from Matthew tells of a master, 3 servants, and the talents. And back in first century Palestine, a talent had nothing to do with human ability. And a talent in the ancient world was really a monetary weight, and whose value varied depending on whether it was copper, silver, or gold. While there is no universally accepted answer for the value of these talents, surprisingly, most would agree that it would take an ordinary laborer 6,000 days' wages, or almost 20 years, to earn just 1 talent. Now, if we were to put this into our economy today using a minimal hourly wage, a talent would be equivalent to about $300,000. So in today's term, the master endowed the first servant with about $1.5 million, the second with $600,000, and the third with $300,000. And although the amounts varied between the servants, we can all agree that each of them was put in charge of an enormous sum of money. And because none of these servants could ever earn this amount of money on their own in a lifetime, it really demonstrates the level of trust that the master placed in them. As Christians, God has entrusted us with something of great value as well, something we could never earn or imagine on our own. As individuals, a church, and a partnership, we have been charged with the kingdom, given the sole mission to go and make disciples for Jesus Christ. That's our purpose, and that should be our church's top priority, nothing else. We are to do this by using our gifts, which include our time, our talents, our material resources, and our witness to glorify God, to serve the common good, and to further God's kingdom. Now, it's our job to be faithful to whatever God has given us to do and to manage His gifts within the boundaries of the ability that He has wired into each one of us. You know, God wants more from us, and He would never just be satisfied with getting our money. When you understand the kind of relationship that God desires of His people from the Scriptures, you discover that money is but a detail. And from this parable, I believe there are 6 very important stewardship lessons that we can learn. Lesson 1. What we have is not ours. In our reading, we are told that a man was getting ready for a journey. It was common back then for wealthy men to take long journeys. But before the master would leave, he would arrange to have someone pick up the mail and feed the pets. But even more important than that, he would often delegate control and multiplication of his wealth to trustworthy employees. The money that was given to the servants was not their own. And the money they earned with it was not theirs to keep either. However, those employees were expected to bring a return on what they had been handed over to them. Their job was to manage what was given. Likewise, we must remember that everything we have has been given to us and is really not ours anyway. Our job is to effectively manage what we are given. God has the rights. We have the responsibility. He is the master. We are the manager. And only when we recognize this can we be good managers or stewards of what has been entrusted to us. Lesson 2. We are only given what we can handle. The master gave differing talents to each of his 3 servants. And the most overlooked part of this parable is the second half of verse 15, which says, God gives out his abundance to us according to our abilities. You see, Jesus' parable was telling the people that God's purposes do not operate according to what is fair, but rather what is best. God entrusts different stuff to different people according to his purposes. And each of us are endowed differently because that's the way God intertwined diversity into the fabric of creation. Each of us has different but unique capabilities. Our job is to be faithful with whatever amount of talents we have to work with. And even though we are not created equal in regards to the amount of talents we are given, there is equality in everyone, for everyone, found in Jesus' parable. This is why the reward is by the master that he gives is the same for everyone. Lesson 3. Our potential is God's gift to us. What we do with it becomes our gift to him. Verse 16 tells of a man who received 5 talents and went at once and put his money to work, and he gained 5 more. The guy who got the 2 talents did the same thing, only the text doesn't specifically say he went to work at once, like the first guy did. We do know, however, that he must have worked hard because he also doubled his master's money, ending up with 4 talents. And even though we don't read about any specific instructions about what to do with the monies, the first 2 guys went out, worked hard, and multiplied the investment. The third servant, who received the 1 talent, he took a different approach. He went out and he buried his blessing. You know, the practice of hiding valuables in the ground was quite common back in Jesus' time. It was one of the safest but least profitable ways of protecting possessions. We must invest what we are given, which leads to lesson number 4. What we have, we must use, or what we have, we will lose. Proverb tells us, he who gathers crops in the summer is a wise son, but he who sleeps during a harvest is a disgraceful son. Amazingly, instead of owning his guilt, the third servant behaves as if the master should have given him credit for having been so cautious. Because of this, the third guy did not use what he had been given, so he lost it, and so much more. Lesson 5. What we do with what we have reveals our view of God. The servants who doubled their master's money or talents were excited to show the master what they had done. And the language here is pretty insightful. For example, the first servant said, "See, I have gained 5 more." The word see means behold, look. He's bubbling with enthusiasm. He couldn't wait to present what he had done because he wanted to please the master. The man with the 2 talents approached with the same anticipation and excitement. The master is thrilled with both of them because they demonstrated responsibility for their ability. He says the same exact thing to both of them. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness." They were faithful and were called good because they had the right view of the master. The last servant came reluctantly to the master saying, "I knew you were a hard man." Notice that the first words out of his mouth were about himself. I knew. The other guys kept the focus on the master, saying, "Master, you entrusted me." The third guy's perspective was skewed. He looked at the master as someone who was hard and harsh instead of loving and gracious. The third servant was afraid. His fear paralyzed him, so he played it safe. He hid the money so it wouldn't be lost. And he accomplished exactly what he set out to do. Nothing. Like the old saying goes, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. Courage is really not the absence of fear. Courage is moving ahead in spite of your fears. If we view God as a tyrant, then we're going to filter everything through this lens. That's not our God. My point is that for lesson number 6, that a day of accountability is coming. And God will judge us not merely for doing wrong, but for not doing right as well. One day, a professor gave a big test to his students. He handed out all the tests and went back to his desk and sat and waited for them to turn it in. Once the test was over, the students handed their tests back in. And the professor noticed that one of the returned tests had a $100 bill attached to it, with a note saying $1 per point. At the next class, the professor returned the test. And this particular student got back his test, his grade, and $64 in change. My point is that with most of Jesus' parable, including this one, Jesus incorporated the theme of judgment into his stories. And given the uncertainties of transportation in Jesus' day, the time of the master's return, even for a well-planned event, was often so very open-ended. Those servants knew that the master would return someday and evaluate them. They just didn't know when. And just like those earthly servants, we do not know the day or the hour that our earthly lives will end. A man died and waited at the pearly gates for his judgment. St. Peter told him, "Before you meet with God, I should tell you, we looked over your life, and to be honest, you really didn't do anything particularly good or bad. We're not really sure what to do with you. Can you tell us anything that can help us make a decision?" The newly arrived soul thought for a moment and replied, "Yeah. Once I was driving along and came upon a person who was being harassed by a group of thugs. So I pulled over, got out a bat, and went up to the leader of the thugs. He was a big, muscular guy with a ring pierced through his lip. Well, I tore that ring right out of his lip and told him that he and his gang had better stop bothering this guy or they would have to deal with me." "Wow, that's impressive," said St. Peter. "When did this happen?" The man replied, "About 3 minutes ago." Funny story, but very insightful and to the point. We need to be faithful stewards of all that the Master has entrusted to us. Jesus is coming again. But when? Faithfulness means watching, waiting, living a lifestyle of preparedness and readiness, and doing what God called us to be doing. So, back to my earlier question. Who do you think the man chose as his wife? Well, not the first. She was self-focused on her beauty. And God is not interested in how we look, but only what we do. It wasn't the second either. She tried to buy the man's heart and affection by flowering him with gifts. Our God doesn't want sacrificial gifts. He accepts us just as we are. But we are to use the gifts that He has given us to glorify Him, to serve the common good, and to further God's kingdom. So it had to be the third, right? Unfortunately, not her either. Yes, it is true that she multiplied her investment, but remember, she returned the original balance back to the man and kept the other half for herself, investing it for a rainy day. Our God doesn't expect us to pay, for us to pay Him back. As a matter of fact, there is no way we could ever earn our own salvation except through accepting Jesus Christ. However, in the meantime, God does expect us to share our abundance and our gifts with others, to go and to make disciples for Jesus Christ so that they can come to know Him. We must remember that everything we have has been given to us and is not really ours anyway. Our job is to effectively manage what has been given. Remember that God has the rights and we have the responsibility. He is the master. We are the manager. So in summary, stewardship is best defined as the use of God-given resources for the accomplishment of God-given goals. Now we're all in this time between the master who is on his long journey and the time of his return. Are you actively using the talents He gave you for the kingdom? Or have you buried them in the dirt? If you have, there is still time to go and dig them up and start investing in His kingdom. It is my hope that when your day comes, these words echo loud and clear in your ears. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share in your master's happiness. Got talent? For all that God has done for us, doesn't He deserve a little return on His investment? And like any prudent investment, God does not leave His return to chance. He pursues it. And His agent in this pursuit is His church. You and me, where good stewardship is taught and practiced. So, is it really worth losing everything by doing nothing? I don't think so. Amen.